So here we are, in lesson 23 of Learn the Shot that Swings for Three, part 3. Well, we've dealt with the shoulders for power, the forearms for shape, and as you'll know from before, we looked at the wrist to control the trajectory. Now, if I go back to my wheel analogy, the shoulders give me the power within the plane. My arms come together, and then forearm rotation facilitates the movement of the arms. The optional bit is wrist hinge. You can play very, very good golf with no wrist hinge at all. You must have shoulder coil and you must have forearm rotation. But to a certain extent, wrist hinge is an option. If you don't use your wrists, you're probably going to hit a lower shot than if you do use your wrists and hit a high shot. So it's very simple. Non-wristy keeps the ball low, and active wrists lets the ball go high. Now, going back to my earlier lessons, I said to you, if you remember one thing from me, remember the parallel left thumb. Well, the thumb resting properly on the golf club, parallel to the shaft, allows the club to hinge to 90 degrees. Now, what is interesting is that the movement in the swing is 45 degrees. If the club were up my sleeve, for instance, I'd have to find 90 degrees. But when you play golf, you start off with a certain amount of angle between your forearm and the shaft. So there's the correct grip in the thumb pad of the left thumb. I hinge my wrist to 90 degrees, and all is well. If the thumb were long, I would overhinge to 135. So it's very important that the left thumb hangs parallel and level with the first knuckle on the index finger. If you can see that, the thumb and the first knuckle, we don't want the thumb to go beyond the knuckle. So, now that the grip is hinged to 90 degrees, we're safe. I can add the right hand to it. So if I stand up, I can show you shoulder turn, I can show you forearm rotation, and now this is wrist hinge. That last little piece at the end. Not only do you need wrist hinge in the backswing, we also need wrist hinge in the follow through. So here's shoulder turn, here's forearm rotation, and there's wrist hinge. You can see it at the end. You know, when we're trying hard in golf or when under pressure in a bad lie or down in a match for whatever reason, we tend to get tense. And the first place that tension attacks is the wrists. And the moment you get tight in your grip and your forearms lock up, you shut your wrist down and you prevent the wrist hinging. Now, the thing about wrist hinge is counterintuitive. We all think that if we keep the wrist stiff and non-active, we'll be more accurate. That's not true. Wrist hinge creates accuracy. You couldn't throw a dart with a stiff wrist. You couldn't play snooker or pool with a stiff wrist. You need some play in the wrist hinge in snooker, and you need a little bit of movement or mobility in the wrist hinge when you're throwing a dart. The same is true in golf. You'll find, because of the structure of the club, that your wrist will work the most the wedge and the least with the driver. But that all happens automatically. As long as your grip is good and you turn your shoulder, you're going to get good wrist hinge. Let's just show you that with a 6 iron. I can hit your golf shot on this occasion with no wrist hinge. It'll be like a 3/4 swing. You can see that was accurate, and the ball flew nice and low. Now this shot, I'll add wrist hinge in. Everything else will be the same, but the ball will fly much higher. Golf ball goes a bit further, goes more creative, there's more club head speed. So if you're playing into wind and hitting a low shot, you pull the club up your sleeve, less wrist hinge, you'll probably need another 1 or 2 clubs to make up the shortfall.